Joining me now are Democrats Richard Blumenthal of Connecticut and Cory Booker of New Jersey. Senator Booker was a Division I football player at Stanford, a new ACC power these days. They've introduced a bill.
You had to go there.
I did. They've introduced a bill to create a national system that would allow athletes to have agents, create a medical trust fund for some athletes' expenses, and it would establish a college athletics corporation to set and enforce rules. We're going to get to the corporation forming in a minute. Gentlemen, welcome.
Thank you.
I know you guys have been working hard on this, but let me just start quickly to you and the experience, the importance of being a college athlete and how you're bringing that experience to this bill.
Well, for me, I saw a system that I wouldn't be sitting here if it wasn't for Division I college football. It gave me opportunities that I never imagined I'd have. I say I got into Stanford because of a 4.0, 1,600, 4.0 yards per carry, 1,600 receiving yards my senior year at school. But when I got there, and especially in the subsequent years, I saw how profoundly unfair the NCAA system was, and it wasn't athletic focused. So you'd have kids that would get a serious injury, and years out, they're still paying out of pocket for medical expenses of something they did, putting people in the seats.
By the way, a lot of guys go to Stanford. They invent some great app. They're immediately allowed to make money as a sophomore or junior in college, right?
Yeah.
You, as a sophomore or junior in college, weren't allowed to make any money.
No, and if they try to do something crazy like sell their jersey, which is going in the bookstore for more money than their parent might make in a day's labor, they suddenly get sidelined for that.
All right, so Senator Blumenthal, explain Congress setting up a corporation, I guess, similar to Amtrak? That's another way that Congress has set up a corporation. Explain the necessity of this.
Well, first, Chuck, thanks for having a great college athlete and me. I've been trying to buy Cory's college jersey for a long time.
It's a high price on eBay.
I can't afford it. But here's the story on what we're trying to do. And we're doing it in a bipartisan way. Senator Jerry Moran, who couldn't be with us today, is a partner in this effort. And the College Athletics Corporation would oversee a national standard for name, image, and likeness. National standards are important because right now we have a patchwork of different
About 30 states, right, have passed 30 different laws, it seems like.
And a national standard is important so that college athletes can make good choices about where they go to school when they are really stars, and so that we have national standards also for health, for educational opportunities. When a college athlete is injured, in a lot of places, he loses, or she, their scholarships. And the health trust fund that we want to establish also is important.
What type of authority do you imagine this to have, Senator Booker, this corporation, would it set a salary cap?
So the process that we've gone through, and I think it's really important what the senator said, we wanted to make it bipartisan. We have Jerry Moran working with us. We haven't put out legislation yet. We put out a discussion document to get the input of folks that often aren't at the table, not just all the schools and universities or the leagues, but also with the students themselves and student athletes representatives. And everybody, though, seemed to have this idea that you need to create that level playing field where you create that preemptive authority. But this organization, as the senator put it, that we want it to be able to have the interests of everybody at the table, and so have what the NCAA doesn't have. It's a bunch of universities and colleges representatives. You don't have the athlete's voice there and other specialists that are really important. And so on certain aspects of governance, we want them to supersede the state's legislation as well as a lot of the things that the NCAA should be doing, but I don't think are doing.
Who would be on this board? Who would be? How do you envision? Is this corporation? Would they take over where the NCAA once regulated?
Well, as Senator Booker put it so well, we want really college athletes to be at the table, the university.
How? They're not unionized. There's not a. I think that's coming, but we could get. I will sort of push that aside here. But how do you get the players represented before that?
Well, they would be chosen. Obviously, we can't have too many of them because we want this College Athletics Corporation to be a working group that is enforcing the law. I think the key here is enforcement, because the NCAA can't really enforce rules. It can't even make rules right now. And the rules that are made to apply nationally should be enforced by this group, and a broad cross-section of all the key actors, the people who have a stakeholders in this kind of enterprise ought to be there. And remember, as you put it so well at the very beginning, we're talking here about a $16 billion industry. which is immensely powerful. In some parts of the country, it is really probably the economic driver in local communities.
You know, it's interesting here, Senator Booker. We're focused on this issue right now with NIL. And yet we're all watching the coming apart of college sports in other ways with the conference realignment. I joked about Stanford being this new ACC power. And they're generating, this is all about money over here. So while we're in the middle of, it feels, I almost worry that we're like solving a problem over here while 10 more are being created over there.
Well, that's why we're looking at this, a lot of other issues involving this. As the Senator said, the health, the education, the safety standards, creating enforceable standards. There's no enforceable concussion protocols, sexual assault rules.
So you would like to see this corporation include all of that?
Look, I think college football and college sports in general is in crisis right now. We all see it. And this is nothing new that the almighty dollar has been controlling the game. We've seen time and time again over the years how that's been often the most important principle, not the well-being of athletes. What we want to do is put athletes at the center of this finally, and giving them, not only just empowering them with NIL rules, but protecting them from a lot of the, frankly, exploitation that we've seen over the years.
Well, let's talk about this health issue. So is this a situation where maybe guaranteed health benefits for Division I college athletes in perpetuity?
Exactly.
Okay.
Certain kinds of rights to health benefits ought to be guaranteed after an athlete finishes college. Why? Well, you know, a lot of the injuries, for example, traumatic brain injury, occur but are invisible while that student is in school. It may be visible only 5 years later.
Right.
So the out-of-pocket expenses may be very, very substantial, not to mention the insurance parts of it. And likewise, scholarships. College athletes injured, has to take a year out. The scholarship ought to apply after a specific 4-year period. So we're talking here about more than name, image, and likeness.
Well, I want to get to something also that Charlie Baker said, hey, I think I want these NIL collectives to have to abide by Title IX. Would this corporation force a Title IX compliance, meaning 50-50 of NIL collective money, LSU or University of Miami, has to go to women, 50% to men.
Very, very important to me because
D-Conn women's basketball.
Huskies women,
that's right.
They're the stars in our state,
right.
And rightly. They are really not only great athletes, but they're also great role models. And they have brought an interest in college athletics that is just incredible. You know, people who otherwise would take no interest in what's happening on a basketball court are rooting for the D-Conn Huskies because they're great people as well as great athletes.
Let me ask you, since you are a Stanford alum.
And has a great Stanford women's basketball team, too. I don't want to let the Huskies
No, as you should. Again, I look forward to them competing with the University of Miami for the ACC title in those cross-country battles that they take place.
Wow.
Should Congress get involved in this conference realignment business?
Look, right now, I say no. It's very frustrating to me to see what's happening. But in the same way, as a football player, we know the story of Teddy Roosevelt saving college football. We have a role to play to protect folks because as the extraordinary leader, I think Governor Baker's extraordinary leader, has said quite clearly that we give them antitrust exemptions. And we have an authority and a role to play. And so this is what's frustrating to me, is there are things going on that everybody knows is wrong. Should one university, because they have more money, be able to create an inducement for someone to come play at the team? That, to me, is destroying the level playing field that we always think about college football or basketball.
We don't know. I joke about the salary cap, but I'm serious. Like, we know SEC schools have a bigger budget than Big 12 schools.
Listen, I was smart when I started this journey with such a great senior senator. I don't know if he had the same experience. When I started calling around and talking to big-time college football and basketball coaches, but when I talked to the athletic director, they'd often say, God, I really wish you could stop some of this stuff that we're doing to see the salaries that are going crazy for coaches. It's like all of these resources. In many states, the most highly paid public employee. It's not the researcher. It's the college or basketball coach. So what is the controlling force here, and who's at the center of it? The well-being, the education, the health of our athletes, or is it the larger sort of money issues that are controlling our sports?
Senator Blumenthal, let me make it very parochial for you. UConn could get left out of the conference realignment shuffle here. You talked about the importance of UConn basketball. The the football is driving so many financial decisions with this conference. Here's a tremendous program in basketball, men's and women's. And, you know, they've been kind of nomads. You've been having a conference shop.
I think that UConn is going to have to be as scrappy in terms of the conference fight as it is on the basketball.
But you don't think they're going to come to you and say, hey, Senator, help us out here. Get the government involved. This is ridiculous.
I think that our coaches and our university presidents and athletic directors are going to want to really work it out for themselves. I think there are limits to what Congress can and should do in this area. But I think really what's most important is keep our eye on the ball. What's best for the athletes? And it isn't just more dollars in their pockets. It's also educational outcomes, health outcomes. We're talking here about students who, at the end of the day, are going to have careers. They're going to have lives that are separate and apart from athletics, because most of them are not going to make it in the pro.
We've all seen that NCAA PSA.
And
99% of athletes go on to do something else.
Right, but I just want to add this, and this is the wisdom of my senior senator when we started this. Whatever we do is going to have to be bipartisan, and it has to be able to get 60 votes in the United States Senate. So we're not going to be able to solve every problem. But for Americans who are watching what's happening in college sports with this realignment, there's something really sad when you see Stanford University, or a Pac-12 reduced to a Pac-2.
Oregon State and Washington State. I mean, look, this is what did they do?
And so this is what this is.
They're land
and by the way,
I think city.
I think people are chasing the early short-term dollar and losing out on the long-term value of what it means to have a Pacific Coast Athletic Conference. It's really hurting, I think, sport. But again, this is what we've been saying from the beginning of this. Think about the athlete. When I had to travel to play Notre Dame, it was one of the roughest weekends because we'd have a pretty far trip to travel for that one game. Most of my games were as far as we go Colorado, maybe Arizona. Now these young folks, what is their quality of education going to be like? Basketball players, especially, who are playing so many games, crisscrossing this country. Are we really putting their experience, their education, their well-being at the center of this? So they're taking a lot away from these brands that were built up for I grew up listening and learning about some of the great UCLA coaches of the past and the lore and the like. All of that was destroyed. Why? Because for the next season or next few years, we're chasing after this dollar and not protecting what's important. I'm sorry that this is allowed. I'm sorry the NCAA allowed this to happen, and I'm sorry that we're seeing this realignment.
Senator, do you think not only is it inevitable that college athletes end up organizing and creating a players' association, do you think it's necessary?
I think that what we're trying to do is very consistent with the idea that maybe at some point they would have collective bargaining rights, but what we're trying to do is provide the benefits that they would have if they were doing it right now at the table. In other words, they shouldn't have to wait for collective bargaining rights to have, in a sense, a Bill of Rights. When we started
and you're hoping to get player treatment here, things that he's talking about in this bill.
Exactly right. Things in this bill that, in effect, are a kind of Bill of Rights. We're not calling it that because it's not a full
but certain set of rights, a minimum set of rights that players get.
Exactly. And I want every college athlete to have the opportunity to be a Cory Booker, a Rhodes Scholar, a Yale Law School graduate who has gone on to an extraordinary life of public service.
Would you be organizing if you were a player right now?
Organizing is all this. First of all, of course, you want to organize. The question is, what does that look like? There are some great player organizations right now. The reality is, for generations, players have been, and player well-being and player health and player education has not been the central priority. In the past, not under a great leader like this, but you've seen the NCAA only move when they're embarrassed or shamed to do so, showing a women's locker room versus a men's locker room. Having Shabazz Napier say, I go to bed hungry because the scholarships didn't even cover the full cost of it. This is a time that we act just like Teddy Roosevelt did when football players were dying, and they're still dying heat exhaustion and things like that in a way that's unacceptable to me. But the federal government stepped in and said, for the sake of the students and for the sake of college football, the federal government needs to step in. This is definitely one of those periods, because I'm out decades now, but I have friends of mine that I've seen have to pay out of their pocket for medical expenses, have to pay out of their pocket because they had a 60, 70-hour-a-week job as a college athlete, and they couldn't finish the degree on time, but now they have to go in their own pocket to come back and get those last few credits. There's so many examples of how the promise of college athletics and And the promises that were made, I was recruited by Holtz and Schembechler. I can go through the incredible people that recruited me, reputable institutions, but a lot of institutions will promise a bill of goods. As soon as the kid gets there, gets injured or doesn't work out, they pull away all those promises.
Well, I think that's what it sounds like you guys are trying to do, at least build in some consumer protection for the athletes and the parents. Appreciate you guys coming in.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.